What's up, guys? I finished part 3 of Mistborn. It was called Children of a Bleeding Sun, and I really enjoyed this section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about this section, and then I'm going to make some adjusted predictions on what I think is going to happen for the rest of this book. Let's jump into it. So the plot really slows down a little bit in this section, which I am a fan of. Not that I want the plot to be slow, but we've been moving so quickly through the plot. It's been happening fast. We've been jumping and hurtling at light speed that it was nice to slow down and take a look at some of the mysteries of the past. So one of the biggest things we discover is that the book that Vin managed to escape with, barely escape with, out of Credit Shore is actually a journal, or appears to be a journal of the Lord Ruler. And I made a prediction that it was going to be like a religious text that he follows, and I was a million miles away. But this is much cooler. So it would appear that this journal from the Lord Ruler is actually the same thing that we're reading at the start of every single chapter, which means they have the same information as us. And I thought that was a really cool idea. And the more I read, the more I think there's a lot of parallels between the Lord Ruler back then and Kelsiers now. But we'll talk more about that in a minute. So we get some progress from Vin in social circles. What she manages to do is she and Ellen essentially see eye to eye. They see that they both have similar progressive ideas on the Scar and how things should be run. Now, this storyline is cool. I like the characters. They're pretty well nuanced, but the only problem is it feels very clumsy. It feels very shoved together, and I said that when they first met. So this storyline I can't enjoy as much just because of the nature of how they conveniently bumped into each other, but I'm still excited to see where it goes. And where is it going? Well, I do have some predictions that I'm going to say for a little bit later, but what's quite obvious is that the younger nobles, or at least a small group of younger nobles, a little bit or a lot disenchanted by how things are run currently. So problems may arise there. We also get a lot more information on who betrayed Kelsiers, and this information that it was Mare, his lover and or maybe wife, would disprove my theory that it was his brother who betrayed him. However, I'm not 100% certain that it was Mare, and I'll go into my predictions, but it just seems too easy. The information is very suspicious. There's a lot of holes in it, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I am glad we managed to dive backwards a little bit and take a look at that period of time, and I hope we learn more and more and more, and I'm sure we're going to learn more and more about the pits, the betrayals, and what happened back in the day, because it seems like it was a really interesting period of time. But the most exciting thing that happened in this section for me was learning about feruchemistry. I think it's pronounced feruchemistry, might be ferochemistry. And it's essentially the idea that the Terrace are able to store things inside of metals. And what we know so far is they're able to store some strengths, they're able to store some memories, and it's alluded to the fact that they could store more in there. And that opened up so many ideas for me as to what could have happened previously and what could happen going forwards. And I'm so excited to give some predictions on that. But it would appear that there are more things that can be hidden in the metal than just strengths and memories. So yes, I was having a field day once I found that. And I'm so excited that we're learning more about the Terrace, because these people are obviously intertwined with the Lord Ruler and intertwined with his ascension. So the more I learn about the Terrace, the more I learn about the Terrace, the more I learn about the Lord Ruler, and he is by far the most interesting character to me so far. So finally we get back to the main plot, and what's happened is Yedin was left in charge. He was left as the general, and due to Kelsiers' display previously and how he boosted the confidences in this Scar, essentially slave army, he decided to go and attack a garrison. And what did it do? Well, it did destroy that garrison, which is the biggest victory for Scar in living memory. But it also destroyed like 5/6 or 5/7, I think, of the army. So terrible decision. We also get to see pewter dragging at this point. And what that is, well, you obviously know what it is, but it's when basically you take pewter and you drag out its effects over a long period of time. It's another great example of Sanderson giving me the rules, which seem very rigid, and then just showing me how to not bend those rules, but utilize those rules in ways that I hadn't thought of, which makes it exciting. It also makes it feel like we are discovering the magic system actually, because we've got the main basic rules, but now we're learning more and more about it. It's crazy. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. I was trying to think of an example in real life where that happens, but I suppose anything, like on the face of it, a lot of things look simple, especially if someone's really good at it. But then if you try to get good at it, like a sport, for example, you learn the basics. And then as you get further and further and further and further into that sport, what you realize is that there's nuances to those basics. There's ways you can manipulate those basics, and there's certain times to use them and times not to use them. And you realize that the basics are actually so malleable that it's crazy. And you see things inside those basics that before you thought was just cut and dry. And now, because you're an expert at it, you're like, oh my God, I cannot believe that I thought the basics were all there is to it. So I don't know if that was an amazing example, but if you're really good at something and you're watching this, just think back to when you were like not good at it and you first started, and now how much intricacy you can see in those basics. That's kind of what it feels like. Sanderson gave us these basics, and now he's going to show us how the masters use the intricacies and use those basics to be successful, which I think is really cool. So overall, what do I think of this section? It was a much needed lull in the plot line, and it allowed us to look backwards at some of the mysteries and really build up a bit of character depth. Like, I feel like I like Kelsier a lot more. Now I learned a little bit more about Mayor and his time in the pits. I also feel like we're about to get a bit more of a desperate play, because we have to, because the original plan is out of the window. So there are a few things he could do, and I have some predictions based on it, but now we're going to be moving and accelerating towards the final acts. Now some things have to change if this revolution is going to happen, or even an attempt at it is going to happen. So yes, it was a great foundation to set up the penultimate act for a final flourish. But predictions, that's what we're here for. So let me tell you what I think is going to happen, having only read these first 3 sections. So I want to start with the Terrace's ability, because I was so excited when I found out about this ability. So some things that I feel like we know. Number 1, the Lord Ruler does not like the Terrace being alive. Why? Maybe because, and this feels like it's far-fetched, but I also feel like it's a really good idea. I kind of hope it's true. Maybe the Lord Ruler put something in a metal. He learned this ability that the Terrace has, and he put something into a metal, right? And the reason he wants all the Terrace dead is because he's really worried one of them is going to figure out how to take it out of the metal and take that power and that ability that he managed to store in the metal. And he's the only one who's figured out how to do it. And I was thinking, well, what on earth could he have put in there that isn't like a strength, isn't a memory, isn't, I don't know, like a language or religion, for example, which would be a memory. What could he have put in there? And I had an idea that this deepness thing, I don't really know what it is. It's alluded to the idea that it's like a feeling or a thought or like a power or an energy, but also it's given physical manifestation on like a stained glass window at one point. So I was thinking, what if he managed to figure out how to take this deepness, whatever it is, maybe it's a strength or like a force or a power or an idea, and he put that in a metal. And that's why the deepness is gone. But it's obviously very difficult for him to keep it in there, or he's utilizing some of it in his body. That's how he's like staying alive forever. And what he's worried about is that maybe a Terrace man or woman is gonna come and release the deepness, and we'll be back to square one. Because the Lord Ruler, I might be wrong, everyone probably seems like they're a good guy in their own diary, you know, but in his own journal, he seems like he had good motives. He seems like he was all about the greater good. So maybe the greater good was he had to put this deepness thing inside a metal so that it would stop affecting the world. But then he realized that there was some power in it. I don't know. I'm just rambling here, but the Terrace thing where you can put things in metals is just juicy, very juicy. So that's my prediction. Very far-fetched, but no less a good idea, I think, anyway. We also get this information about Mayor. So apparently Mayor is the one who betrayed Kelsier, which, I mean, it just didn't sit right with me. It doesn't seem correct. And there's a few clues as to why not. So number 1, she ends up joining him in the pits. but 3 weeks later. So the optimist in me would think maybe she betrayed Kelsier so she could win the trust of the Lord Ruler and have a much better shot at bringing him down. She attempted to bring him down, and that's when she was actually put into the pits. Because she also, if I remember correctly, has a picture, and she was the one who gave it to Kelsier, of before the ash came down with all the green and luscious land, and that's how he knows about the green and luscious land. So how would she get that? I would guess only someone like the Lord Ruler has that. So maybe she was the Lord Ruler's lover for a little while and then realized that he was evil and tried to kill him. I don't know. I don't think that Mare actually betrayed him. I want to be an optimist about this. I'm still leaning towards her brother, because her brother obviously was in love with Mare, it would seem, based on the comments that we've had so far. So maybe there was like some kind of jealousy. Maybe he betrayed Mare maybe he betrayed Kelsier and told the Lord Ruler that Mare was on their side so that he could be with Mare at the time. And then she found out, tried to kill the Lord Ruler, and now she was in the pits, and then she was murdered, and Marsh organised that. I don't know, for some reason I got Marsh as this like evil overlord, and I don't know why. There's no real evidence for it, but I stand by the fact that I think he's involved with the betrayal somehow. And what we're doing is we're really setting up a moral dilemma, and there's always moral dilemmas for any story, but a classic one that we're seeing here is, if there's a dictator and a really solid authoritarian regime in place, is the amount of pain and death and disarray going to be proportionate to what we can create afterwards? Like, is it worth us upheaving the entire world so that we can put a new order in place? And this is the dilemma we're struggling with. But I think the way that Kelsier is going to try and get around this is, there's so many similarities between the Lord Ruler, in his journal at least, and Kelsier. They're just very similar. They're kind of taking on this, like, I am the chosen one mentality. Although there seems to actually have been prophecies when it comes to the Lord Ruler, but there's no Terrace around to give prophecies now, so maybe there is one about, you know, the next one. But it would seem with something like this, instead of taking apart the entire system, which is probably going to have to happen because the Scar are massively mistreated, we do need strength still. So I think Kelsier is probably setting himself up to be placed in the Lord Ruler's place. However, I do think that we're obviously not going to get a conclusion in this book. I believe it's a trilogy, at least, this storyline is. So I would be surprised if we even really meet the Lord Ruler in this book. I hope we do, though, because he is by far the person I'm most interested in meeting. And on a lighter note, I think that Vin is ignoring the Spook problem. Spook has professed his love with the gifting of a beautiful lace handkerchief, I believe, and she's completely ignoring it. So I think we're setting up for maybe Spook getting jealous of Elend, or it just feels like it's going to end badly for either Spook or Elend. And most likely it ends really badly for Spook because he seems like a good guy. And I'll be honest, I cannot understand how he speaks. I don't know if anyone else really struggled with that, but like when he does his sentences, I don't know if it's a problem on my behalf or if it's intentionally really difficult to read. I don't know what he's saying. I have absolutely no idea. So if there's a system to it, please let me know, because I've not got a clue what he's saying and I feel a bit silly to keep on trying to read it. So yes, I predict there's going to be a grisly end for Spook, and maybe it will come at the hands of Elend because Spook will try to attack him or something along those lines out of jealousy for Vin. So Vin needs to deal with that situation early or else there's going to be a problem. So what is going to happen next in the main plot and storyline? As I said, there has to be a big pivot in the plan. We've lost 5/7 of the army. So I see 3 potential things happening. Number 1, we try and free Plantation Scar. We realize that this is the fastest way to get a lot of people on board. So what we do is we go and we destroy several different plantations masters, and then we take those Scar and we build an army out of those Scar. So that's option 1. Option 2, we approach the nobles and we try to make an alliance with them to overthrow the Lord Ruler. Going to be very difficult because the only nobles we know for certain, well, not even for certain, but maybe are sympathetic to our cause are the young nobles who are not even the heads of their houses yet. So we'll see on that one, but it is an option. The final option in my eyes is some kind of like infiltration, assassination attempt. We sack off the whole revolution for now. And what we decide to do is we decide to bring a crack team to the pits to try and get ATM, take that ATM, try and assassinate the Lord Ruler, something along those lines. I hope that doesn't happen. I kind of like the idea of the revolution, and I think the revolution is going to happen overall because we have a few books left still, and it kind of has to, right? That's the point of the story. That's the goal, is to free the Scar and the inequality in the world. So I'm leaning towards option 2 with the nobles, but the plantation one would be fun as well. So if you've enjoyed this breakdown and prediction, go back. I've done the part 1 and part 2. I'm going to be doing the rest of this series moving forwards. I also did this for the Wheel of Time, so I'd love to have you join me there. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.